In today's 10-minute opening video, I'm going to teach you how to play the London system, which has a little bit of a bad reputation in the sense that since you kind of play it the same way all the time, folks are called lazy and boring sometimes, but we're going to get rid of all those opinions today, and I'll show you how to really put some pressure on your opponents early on, depending on how they set up. So after d4, we've got to pay attention to how our opponents are setting up their pieces. Most commonly, you will face this move d5, and then you should play bishop f4, and we're going to get started with the London from there. But obviously, you also have to deal with King's Indian and other setups, which we will cover. In the London, with d5 on the board, you've got to always be monitoring whether or not the c-pawn comes forward, whether the opponent moves out the light-squared bishop early, or whether the opponent blocks in the light-squared bishop, and so on and so forth. Also, if you are offered a trade of dark-squared bishops. After knight f6, you will play the next move e3. You are delaying knight f3, and I will tell you for good reason you are delaying knight f3. Okay, keep that in mind. Notice that I have not played knight f3 yet. Let's say the opponent does not challenge us with c5 just yet. Plays e6. Now we continue with knight f3, bishop d6. This bishop trade, I recommend sliding the bishop back one square, almost always, and that is because the capture here will allow us to open up the h-file for the rook, and maybe we'll even postpone castling. So this trade, this little slide back technique is perfectly fine. Let's say castles, bishop d3, knight c6. Now, against knight c6, you may want to complete your little pyramid of pawns here before you get this knight out to d2, just so the opponent cannot play knight b4. So keep in mind c3, always a useful move. Knight d2, and let's say something like queen e7, okay? Queen e7 is an important move to remember, and just in general, any move that allows the opponent to play the move e5. This is the million-dollar square in the London, and you do not want your opponent to be pushing the e-pawn there successfully. If they are able to do that, they get an equal position. Okay, and we're going to try to shut that down by hopping into e5 at the right moment, supported by the pawn, the bishop, and maybe Stonewall style with the f-pawn right after, so we have that lock on the center. If you see e5 coming, you need to put your knight there. Now, just playing a random move for black and getting to this position. From here, you can begin active operations on the king side. How do you do that? Well, after you hop in here, you're going to try to play f4. Now, if the opponent had already done something like this and forced their knight back, this is perfectly fine for you, because you already have queen h5 coming. Maybe you're launching forward the f-pawn, or even a simple pawn trade in the center to get your knight in the game and another piece attacking on the king side. So all different ideas. Queen h5, queen f3, queen h3 in certain positions, not this one, obviously, with the bishop on g3. But these are all the different attacking ideas when you get the knight in the center in the London against the castled king, f4, trying to bring the queen to this side. Maybe the bishop comes out this way as well. You have to build your experience in these positions. Now, one thing that did not happen early on in this setup is black never played c5. So let's take a look at what happens when black does play c5. All right? Against c5, black can play c5 on the second move. e3 is always good. And I would recommend just continuing our natural development with knight d2, c3, and so on. Now, early queen b6 stuff to attack the b2 pawn can be a little bit scary, but there's a very cool tactical way to take care of this, and that move is actually knight to c3. You should look at this early knight c3 stuff against c5. Very tricky, and taking on b2 is simply too dangerous because you play knight b5, you have knight c7 coming, and there's ways that this queen can just simply get trapped on a2. For example, there's one continuation here like this, where you take the knight and then get the knight on c7, excuse me, and take the rook on a8. This is actually, these positions are simply devastating for the black side. So queen b6 can be met with an early knight c3, and if our opponent does not take on b2, we simply play rook b1, and this queen has no positioning. One more thing I will add about an early knight c3, Jobava London. There is some venom in these early knight c3 systems. You can consider adding them to your repertoire. Very tricky stuff. Once the opponent commits to c5, suddenly we do this, and if they play something like a6, then we just develop naturally knight f3, bishop e2, queen d2, even try to castle queenside. That is just one option. But you don't need to play like this. You can just play knight to f3 and develop naturally and continue to go for that setup with knight d2, c3, and so on. It is considered the more modern approach right now in the London to not play a very early c3. So right here, play knight d2 before you play c3, That way, when the queen comes out, you can always play rook b1, and there's even some d takes c5 venom systems. Okay, so don't be worried about an early c5, don't take, just continue to develop and reinforce your center. Against the early light squared bishop movement systems, what I like to do is actually switch it up into a queen's gambit. I like to play c4, and that allows me to bring my queen out and put some pressure on the newly weakened b7 pawn. So bishop comes out here, c4 and knight c3 with queen b3 coming, and some queenside pressure since the bishop abandoned the b7 pawn. So depending on how your opponent is setting up in the beginning, there's going to be pluses and minuses with all the different stuff. Now, you know, if they don't play d5 early on, but they play something like knight f6, you should continue to play bishop f4. And now we're going to look at King's Indian. So against g6 systems, I always recommend knight c3. This is really going to throw people off, because if they continue with King's Indian, suddenly they're in a Peert's defense. You've played e4, and you're going to play a quick queen d2, bishop h6, long castles. This is not what a King's Indian player wants to get from the opening, to get move ordered into this very aggressive system, not to mention one where, you know, you're going to be playing things like f3, g4, h4, h5 to get to their king. And if the opponent plays d5, there's one very exciting system here. So d5, preventing e4, you play e3. If they play bishop g7, you play the amazing move h4. I highly recommend you go look at this position in the database. A lot of super strong GMs play this. Levon Aronian, to name one. I think Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has played this. Wouldn't be surprised if Magnus Carlsen has given this a shot. And this is the idea. If castles, you just play h5. And then you sacrifice your rook and get a devastating attack along the h-file on the opponent. This position at a deep enough engine depth is just is lost for black. Black cannot survive this position. So most players with the black pieces will play h5 to prevent you from playing h5. But then you develop normally. You put a knight on e5, you can play your bishop to d3, target these pawns, try to create a kingside pawn storm, and obviously you will try to castle queenside. So against any sort of Indian system, the second you see the move g6, highly recommend knight c3 and going for a long castles. I did tell you, we're not just lazily developing our pieces in this London setup, we're going to try to put pressure on our opponents. And I should say, you can do it even here. Like, let's say I play g6, all right, knight c3. Knight c3, g6, knight c3, and try to play h4, h5. So investigate this system. I think it will be very useful for you. The only other thing that I can really think about is very early c5 stuff. Now, for example, d4, knight f6, bishop f4, c5. In general, the best thing to do here is just to play the d5 central push. Because, you know, if you play e3, there's some positions where black does not need to play d5, and that can be a little bit annoying. So d4, I recommend this. Here there is a gambit called the Vaganyan gambit, knight c3, queen takes b2, and bishop back to d2. It's the poison pawn, so I know you've developed two tempi, but your next moves are going to be e4, f4, overwhelming your opponent in the center. The Vaganyan gambit, named after Raphael Vaganyan, Armenian grandmaster from back in the day. And if your opponent doesn't play like this, you know, just plays d6, again, we're going for the same stuff. Knight c3, e4, queen d2, and some sort of long castles. You know, d4, c5, the same thing. You can play d5, and, you know, you can set up with the bishop on f4, all the same. Against, you know, the Dutch, for example, you can play the Staunton gambit, very aggressive gambit, or you can play the London all the same, but you would need to probably castle queenside against the Dutch systems, or try to attack this pawn with f3, e4 setups in the future. But for the most part, that's as good of a breakdown that I can give you, you know, in about 10 minutes for the London system. You will get some garbage sometimes like this, you know, knight c6 and then e3, f6, trying to take, you know, the center with e5. No early f6 system is good against the London, but, you know, obviously London players, you should be familiar with how to take advantage of nonsense play like this. I would just play aggressively, like h4, g4, and then maybe knight d2, and then develop normally. Against systems where your opponent does not develop a lot of pieces, try to open the center as quickly as possible, so something with e4, maybe c4, quick development, and don't just lazily develop your pieces to the squares that you think they belong. If you're a beginner and you've gotten to this, you know, point in the video, you can obviously play the London in a bit more calm fashion, not trying to punish the opponent, but if you're a 15, 16, 1700 rated player, the London is still great. And if you don't play it in a lazy way, you really try to punish opponents and challenge them depending on which way they set up with this knight c3 stuff, this h4, h5 stuff, or this aggressive, you know, knight e5 and attacking system, the London will actually be a lot of fun and it won't be boring at all. So, that's basically how you play the London in about 10 minutes. Let me know your thoughts or questions about the London system in the comments below. And today's chat question is, let me know where you're watching from in the world. What city are you currently in? And, well, I look forward to your answers, and I'll see you in the next video.